Okay, hello everyone. If you are in the right place, I hope you are. This is Coffee and Collaboration, creating discussion-based programming for graduate students with graduate students. And I want to give a shout out to San Jose State University School of Information for being a founding partner at this awesome conference that we are all attending right now. Okay, so my name is Calantha Tillotson. I am an assistant professor and subject librarian for the College of Communication Information at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, which includes the School of Information Sciences, which is how I met this lovely human being.
Hi, so I'm Amy Snyder. I use she, her pronouns. I am a recent graduate of that MSIS program at UTK. The school itself is mostly an online program, so about like 90%, if not more than that, of the students, they attend entirely virtually, so they can be anywhere across the world, basically, and still get their degree. But the school itself is based in Knoxville. So I was a student leader of both the American Libraries Association and the Special Libraries Association student chapters at UTK. And our main responsibility was to create virtual events for students, kind of an informal space for them to get to know people in the profession and do stuff extracurricularly. And so we had a meeting with the other officers and we were trying to figure out who we should invite to speak for the 2022-2023 school year. And Calantha was at the top of the list. We really wanted her to host a single event that fall of 2022. And she hosted on her own volition. Calantha hosted orientations for various aspects of the library system, but not everyone in the program attended these for various reasons. Like I personally, I didn't hear of them. They weren't promoted or whatever. And so people might not know Calantha. So when we decided to have this event, it was kind of a cold call. I never really knew her. But we thought that hosting an event in an informal setting that we could provide would help students know that she was a resource that they could use and like to get to know her more personally. And so that led to the Rainbows and Cow Pies presentation that is right up here. So she talked about her journey to being a librarian and like the different advice that she could offer to those in the profession. It was the most lecture-y of the events that we have eventually created, but it still had it was still heavily a discussion at the end where we talked about being both graduate students and new professionals in the field and the challenges that come with both. It was a really unique event in the whole space that the school had because most of the events that we held were lectures and not really discussions. And this also spoke more to the student experience rather than just like the cool things that librarians did at their jobs. Like for example, we had the archivist from NASA speak to our event or speak with us at an event. And that was definitely more of a lecture of her telling her story rather than us talking about that story. And so after we had Rainbows and Cow Pies, students who attended told us that they really wanted more events like this, that they wanted more events that spoke to the student life and like the challenges and the things that they were looking forward to becoming professionals. And so that's when we decided to make this into a series. And that's where Coffee with Calantha came from, because we wanted to make it an ongoing thing. And so we decided to have two others later that school year and have different topics to keep it engaging for the student body. So that led to this second event.
So, one of my favorite things, not only did I get to talk about how much fun it was to enter into the profession and it was like a timeline of my career up until that point. But what was exceptionally cool about that program was the fact that even though it was over Zoom, we still worked really hard to make sure that, like, I didn't take up the whole time. I made sure that they were aware that I was going there to hear their stories too. And that was something that was really important to me. That was something that was really important to Amy, but it still was very much a more formal presentation than what became Coffee with Calantha. So when we finished the first session, the standalone, Amy and I, we went out for actual coffee, which was great. And we discussed whether or not, like how often we felt that we could do these types of events, whether or not we, like what format we really wanted to keep them at in order to, capture as much interest from the students as possible in the program. But then also really it was about the topics. And so we'll talk about this a little bit later about, having very honest conversation about our capacity for these events, as much as we were interested and passionate in it. And so we decided we were going to actually start with 2 events in the spring, because spring tends to be a little bit slower than the fall when it comes to onboarding everybody to the university. And so we were able to plan it at the same time as the School of Information Sciences was doing a bunch of different events in like February and March of 2023, talking about the job search process, interviewing. One of my favorite events that happened, there was a faculty member who was talking about negotiating. And I was like, I wish I had gotten this in grad school. That would have been really great. So it was definitely embedded in several of the same types of events that were happening at the same time. But what was unique about it is we made really clear that this was going to be a discussion. So I was going to talk from a personal stance of, here are the different types of interviews I've gone through. And also, here are some of the resources that helped me along the way. Here are some of the like strategies that I use to kind of keep track, if nothing else, keep track of everywhere that I was I was trying to get a job from and going through the interview process. But I wanted to be vulnerable in that sense of saying, like, here were the positives and the negatives of all these interviews I went through. Here were the ones I didn't even get a first interview with, like that. So it happens to all of us. And so I think because of that, because I kept it pretty short, like I only talked for, I think it was about 20, 25 minutes. And then we kept the rest of the hour just for conversation. And I think that even if the focus of that was really more academia, people in the program who are interested in going into the academic librarian track, we did have people who were interested in public and school librarian and special librarianship. And I could at least speak to the school and public because I have worked at either of those. But I didn't also make it really clear, like, I want to hear about how what you will be facing will differ from what I have faced, because I've primarily worked in academia. And so, yeah, that was really amazing, honestly. And it caused me to feel so much more comfortable about the type of space that we were trying to create, because we didn't have the same people both times, right? And we never have the same people. We do have a few overlappers, right? But for the most part, it's a brand new crop of students. But every single time we do something like this, I feel like we get more and more of an open conversation when people are really honest about their fears about the process. So that started, I think, with job seeking, right? Because people were really talking about how frustrated they were with trying to keep track of all the opportunities that were out there, but also not knowing what to expect to the process. And every type of library, it feels different when you're going through the interview process. So that was completely fair. So I appreciated that everybody was showing up and was very authentic about where they were coming from. And that actually led us to the third event. So when we were doing job seeking, that was happening online. So then I'll let Amy take it away, because we did our first in-person one.
Yeah, and actually, looking back through the emails, it was the first in-person event since COVID that the school had held. So we were really excited about that. It was again, like I said before, a very small amount of the students in the program are actually in person in Knoxville, and so we still wanted to foster that community, getting the people who did live in town, getting them to this event to make more connections and learn more about the people that are around them, and hopefully Again, this is about collaborating, hopefully collaborate with them in the future. So it was a smaller crowd than the online events that we hosted, just because, like I stated, there's fewer people that live in town. There's also the logistics of going to a place instead of just clicking on your computer. But we were still really happy with how much the discussion was, like how focused we were on the discussion part. Like Calantha maybe talked like 10 minutes beforehand, but the rest of the time was just a great conversation about working together in each person's respective libraries, and ways that they have worked in a library or in the classroom or any other place in the past. It was a really intimate conversation, honestly, like just talking about your fears and your struggles and things that worked well, things that didn't work well. Um, and having those types of conversations really only happened, like Calantha said, because there were people who came to the other events and like knew that there was that trust there of, this is a informal, safe space. I'm not being graded here. I can talk pretty candidly about my experience and like hear other people echo those experiences. So it was really great to see the student body, as like, even though there were fewer people than the online events, it was really great to connect with the students outside of the Zoom screen. Um, and that's one of my most cherished ones of these that we've done, just being able to have that human contact. And then the next one was also really special for me because I had graduated at this point. So this was the first one that I am a pure participant. I just logged on Zoom. I didn't have to send any emails for this. It was great.
Yeah. Well, and I will say the let's collaborate, when we were doing that one, a couple of the things that really did honestly make it incredibly meaningful to me was the fact that students, well, one, we got to like, Amy and I actually got to go to Publix and we got to pick out
Yeah.
snacks, and then like we got to, not really decorate the room, but like set up the room and make
Have
sure
that
that it was
meta connection
exactly.
beforehand.
Exactly. And so I really liked that. But also, what was really cool from that event was seeing that there was some interest from people who were about to graduate. So we had a couple of people who came who were like in their last semester, who were yeah, exactly, Amy included, who were really were very clear that this was the type of event that they felt was lacking in other spaces,
You're
and
not
that
taught it in the classroom. Yeah.
exactly. And also the fact that I think when we were doing the collaboration one, we started, I think, doing more critical analysis of the profession in a way that we hadn't from the previous two. So people were being very open about what they had struggled with in not just like from a curricular perspective, because obviously that's not really something that I have any say on, but really more about whether or not they felt that getting the master's was beneficial, whether or not they felt confident about entering into a full-time role fairly soon, if they hadn't already, and also we talked a lot about capacity. In that one, we started the conversation about communication boundaries and being really clear about what you can actually accomplish in a given amount of time, and given all of us being completely overworked. And so I think because we were already starting that conversation, at the end of that session, there were two things that came from it. The first one was making sure that we open up these sessions in the future to alumni. So that is something that I will continue talking to Amy about, of making sure we're capturing that audience through our marketing channels for the event. And the other thing was definitely wanting to do another in-person one. Again, because it was so meaningful to the ones that were able to come. And then I would say the third thing that was really important was the topics that we had chosen before were based on conversations I'd had with Amy. But then at the end of that last one, we opened up the floor and said, hey, what all are you interested in discussing? Now that you have been to a few of these, what kind of, issues are you facing? What is it that you want to make sure is highlighted for these kind of open dialogues? And so that is how we came to Burn Baby Burn, which was all about burnout and vocational awe. And those topics had floated around in discussions in the previous year. So a couple things I want to note about this one. The other thing is Amy had already graduated at this point. So I was, very excited. This is one of my favorite things that I get to do every semester. And so I didn't want it to drop, but I also wasn't sure how to make that transition. Amy did kind of pave the way for me because she was aware of who was going to be taking over those student leadership roles. And so I appreciate that she spoke to those students, and then I was also able to speak to the students and gauge their interest in continuing. And luckily, they had actually attended all of the ones, well, except I think for the in-person one, but they had attended the other ones. And so they were, enthusiastic about the type of environment we were trying to create. And so we settled on burnout. The other thing that happened in this one, which I thought was really interesting, was the fact that I had been speaking more from personal experience and kind of lived experience in the profession. And I still did that with burnout, but this was the first one where I was really imbuing a lot more research. And I'd been working on this publication. And so I had just done all of this lit review on these concepts. So I had a bunch of other voices to bring into my portion where I'm just kind of introducing the concept. And so that I think was really helpful because it allowed for a broader perspective. Like students were able to say, well, I mean, not that they didn't trust me when I'm talking about my own experience, but I'm one person in a very big field. And so I think it was helpful to say, well, actually look at all of these other voices in the literature that are describing the same thing that you're probably experiencing. We also expanded it to not just be talking about what burnout feels like and how to cope with it in the field. We also talked about what it was like in grad school. Yeah. So like preparing for the field. And so I thought that was unique and very much appreciated by the people who attended and participated. And then the last thing that I thought was really interesting is we actually had one faculty member from the program who attended, and that, I mean, they mostly stayed off camera, which I thought kind of worked until the very end. And so it was really more the students were able to kind of cultivate their own space, because I would pop in and give encouragement and be present, but really it was a peer-to-peer conversation. And so I think that helped a lot. And then what was also really cool and that I was glad that we did is, even though we were talking about kind of coping mechanisms and things we could try, we were also very clear that this is systematic. Yeah. We cannot fix these issues on our own, but we talked about in all of the positions that we are currently in or will be facing about how we can be in those spaces where decisions are being made about professional norms and what, continue that dialogue. And so I thought that was an important takeaway, is that, yeah, we're not going to fix it right now. There are things that you can do that help mitigate to a certain degree. But I was very clear, like, I faced burnout multiple times in this profession, including when I was in grad school. It happens. I can only do so much. So don't be hard on yourself when you feel like you're facing it again and you should have already solved it, because that's not how it works. So then one of the other things that came from this is that I actually included specific discussion questions kind of before I had sort of just opened it up to the floor and said, hey, here's this topic, let me introduce it. And then how do you guys feel about it? What has been your experience? This time I actually had very specific ideas of how do you define vocational awe? What has actually helped you when did you know that you were facing burnout? And what have you actually been able to do that has mitigated it to any degree? And so I thought that really helped springboard the discussion. So much like the way we do Coffee with Calantha, we wanted to make sure that you had some practical takeaways. And so there are a few things that we've learned throughout this process collaborating. And I would say the first thing, this is not just with Coffee with Calantha, this is something that I have tried to start doing in any type of request that I get from people for service or scholarship. or events or teaching, is make sure that I ask for clear expectations from them. So, and I share clear expectations. And so, I only have so much time, as we all do, right, to devote. And this is something that I'm really passionate about. And so, even when Amy first presented it to me, I was like, yeah, of course I want to do this. But I also wanted to make it clear what I could actually do. And instead of assuming what Amy or the other students would want from me, actually hearing it from them as to what they wanted from me. What did they want us to talk about? How did they want me to show up in that space with them? And so I think that that really helped me devote as much of my energy to this as I felt like I could be authentic with the energy that I was bringing to the table.
Yeah, building upon that, along with asking us like what we wanted, making it an open conversation is another really important aspect. Like again, we started the email conversation with, "Hey, Calantha, can you do one event in fall?" But we kept that line of communication open, both with the students who attended and between the two of us, and like we all kind of agreed at different times like, oh, we should keep this going, and like talking about that as it progressed made it into what it is today and what it will continue to grow into in the future.
Well, and part of that open discussion that and what I really learned from it is the fact that Amy and I both learned, I think, to be very open with each other about how we needed we need to adapt our timeline, or we needed to adapt the focus of each of these events, the format. I really appreciated that after each of the sessions. Now, granted, I'm still figuring out how to collaborate with the new groups, but with Amy, we would actually go and get coffee after a coffee with Calantha, and we would say, hey, what worked, what didn't? Let's reflect on this. Let's make sure that whatever we're doing next is as beneficial as possible. And so that was very, I think that was helpful in building our trust, but it was also helpful in the way that we continued the events.
Yeah, and like again, that kind of ties into like being flexible and adaptable, like learning from like past mistakes to become better in the future. Um, and then also like being realistic with your timeline, like uh, you have to be mindful of all the commitments that you have, whether that you're a grad student or a professional in the field. Um, Projects, assignments, different things that you have to do at work. You have to realize that doing like things that you are really passionate about, it sometimes takes more time than you think it will. And so being able to accurately reflect on, okay, I want to do this thing. I think it'll take X amount of hours, and having that timeline for yourself of saying like at this point I won't work on it anymore, or like I want to put more time into it if I have that to spare. Just being mindful of that, like when you start new projects, definitely helps being a better collaborator.
Well, and speaking of seeking to be a better collaborator, if there are any students out there, one thing that I wanted to really hopefully bring across is the fact that your subject librarians are there to help you, not just with instruction and research, and making sure that you have the resources that you need, but we're also here as collaborators. And now also keep in mind that the first time you ask for something, if that individual comes back and says, well, actually, what exactly do you need? If they ask those follow-up questions, don't think that that's rejecting the idea or that it's not a good concept. I think if anything, they're giving you a compliment, because they're saying, this is something that I really am seriously considering, and I want to make sure that I have the capacity to show up in the way that you actually need, versus referring you to someone who would be able to.
Yeah, and then kind of on the flip side of that, like if you're a librarian and you want to create programming, but you don't kind of know how, or you don't know what students want, ask them. Find the student leaders who are very active on like social media or on listservs, or like send out mass communications. Finding those people, those kind of like key people, and asking them like, hey, I'm interested in creating like a program. Do you guys have any ideas of like what that could look like or what you guys need? um, like that can be really eye-opening for students of being like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Like, let's like talk to some of my fellow students and like see what can happen. And you never know what they'll say or what you'll eventually do. And then finally, trust. It takes time. It really does take time,
Mhm.
and it came from the conversations that I had with, fellow attendees at that first event that we held, and we knew, both they, Calantha, and I, we all knew that it was a good idea and to build upon it because of the students' interest in it, that their call for, "We want more things like this." Calantha and I would not have continued working together, or this long without knowing that the students trusted us and what we were doing. And that in turn gave us the ability to trust each other more with each event that we hosted, to the point now, like I consider Calantha a really good friend and I'm really proud of like what we've done. So yeah, trust it kind of sucks, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And like you never know when you're gonna strike gold, but when you do, you know.
You know, yeah, and I 100% agree with Amy. I could not say that better myself. But I do appreciate that we were as patient with each other in the process as we were, because I think that we have created a space that is really, really unique. And so at this point, I would like to just go ahead and say thank you so much for coming. We really, really appreciate your
Yes.
attendance, and we want to open up the floor to any questions. We also have our contact information here, so please feel free to ask us. We will have all of the slides. So the presentation slides will be here in the chat here in a second.
Yep.
And then
Already put
also,
them in. No.
oh, awesome, Amy.
Mhm.
Amy's amazing. And we will also, if you go on each of those slides, you can click the click me and it'll take you to the slides from each of the events themselves. So if you would like to adapt those in any way, please feel free. But yeah, just give us a shout out and that works. But yes, please, do you have any questions about the events, about us, anything at all?
You can put them in the chat too. Well, while we're kind of waiting, I'm really excited. They're, at least to my knowledge, they're planning on hosting two more events. One in the spring that'll be in person again, and I'm really happy that that's like a tradition that like we kind of started, and that the
Mhm.
current student leaders are um, continuing. That really warms my heart. And like
Yeah.
I'm up in Boston right now. I moved after graduation, and I mean, we'll see, fingers crossed, but hopefully I'll be able to attend that one too. But I will at least attend the Zoom one when that happens.
Well, and I will say, I'm excited actually for both of those events. We're still trying to figure out what exactly we want the in-person event, that topic to be, but we will be doing another job seeking one in probably around February, March. And for that one, actually, we're going to be recruiting, and Amy might be one of them actually. We're going to be recruiting a few recent alumni who have gone into various, like special libraries, public libraries, academic libraries, to be able to talk about their job seeking experience. Because I was also really clear, like, I have been out of the job market for a couple of years. And so I know that even if the experience and a lot of what you would have to prepare yourself for is still the same, I want to make sure that I do give as much time to peer-to-peer conversation as possible. So, but yeah, I'm pretty excited. It'll be fun. Well, if we don't have any questions, if Kelly's not seeing any questions, please do grab our contact information and send us any questions separately if you can think of any. And I think that's it. Is that it, Kelly?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate it. We love talking
Mhm.
about like what we've done. Um, and we hope that you guys create events kind of like what we've done. Like feel free to tweak it and do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
Like hopefully we gave you some inspiration today.
Yeah, we would absolutely love to have this be a ripple effect, and that other library schools are doing something very similar. So, yeah, thank you.